Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. It is not anti-Semitic to point out that certain elites throughout history, including the Khazar ruling class, have strategically adopted Judaism not as a matter of faith, but as a tool for political sovereignty, identity control, and economic insulation. Just as the Vatican weaponized Christianity to justify imperial expansion and the British Crown cloaked colonization in divine monarchy, some elite families used Jewish identity not to elevate a people, but to shield their own power. Critiquing those historical power moves is not a hatred of Jews. It is a rejection of using any religion, Judaism included, as a camouflage for conquest, manipulation, and unearned legitimacy. If you can call out papal tyranny without being anti-Christian or condemn Western colonialism without being anti-European, then you can damn well expose elite identity fraud without being anti-Semitic. The real anti-Semitism is pretending all Jewish people share the guilt of a few who turned sacred identity into a political weapon. There's my disclaimer. I think I got all the disclaimers out of the way, right? Okay, so hopefully you are here for part 2 with Adrian Hicks talking about the Khazarian Empire, are all Jews Khazarian now, the United States complicity in that, and the missing Hebrews. So before I get started, let me say hi to some folks. Adric is here first. He says it's on, and later says number 1. He wants you guys to know. Auntie is here. Hey, with the peace sign, my favorite Auntie. Peace to you as well. Eddie is here on a Sunday, and let's hear it for the Dancing Maggies. And everybody watching from the cloud, this is the best live tribe on YouTube. So feel free to make a comment. You will be welcome. Just, keep it nice. Okay. And shout out to the replay gang. So I'm going to bring up Adrian, but I just wanted to reiterate that I hold Adrian in the highest regard, not only as a colleague and a collaborator, but one of my very best friends. Our work together as co-authors has deepened my appreciation for his intellect, his generosity, and his vision for what is possible when research is guided by justice and grounded in lived experience. So everybody, help me welcome Adrian Hicks.
Hey, how we doing?
I think we're doing well.
Good, good. I still think that disclaimer is a little too generous. I'm starting to wonder if it's somebody else you're talking about.
No, I like your intro and I'm keeping it.
All right.
Oh, Cutting Up with the Joneses is here. Spain Man is here. Xavier Zinkel. Oh, I like that name. Oh, no, I don't. Hold on a moment. I need to take care of a comment. Okay. Ban user.
People cutting up already. We just got started.
Right. We just, I liked the name until I read the comment, and then I didn't like it so much. So to bring people up to speed, last time we talked about Kyrie Irving. And, weirdly enough, we were using some information from Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, which was a shock to us both.
Definitely in the upside down world when you have to, or when you get to quote them for something positive. It's a weird world we live in.
it is a very, very weird world we live in. Spainman says, congrats on 1,000. And I had to look, it's 996 on my end. So just 4 more to reach the 1,000. So anybody
Well, you got rid of
watching-
one of them.
What?
You just got rid of one of them.
Maybe that's why it just dipped right back under 1,000.
Right.
If you haven't subscribed already, please do. It would be nice to get to the 1,000, especially on this video, these videos that we're doing, which would be really nice. But we were doing a lot of talking about Khazarian history and how, you know, that connection to Ashkenazi Jews. And we had kind of ended towards talking about how Jewish people today have been changing their names to sound Semitic instead of Eastern European.
Right.
So we talked about Gal Gadot, and then literally all of the Israeli leaders,
All the prime ministers,
Netanyahu included, all changed their names from Eastern European names to Semitic
sounding names. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of what we left off. Hey, Spainman says it's 1,000.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Hey, thanks.
You did it.
I need the stuff on my end to catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
But thank you for letting me know, Spainman. Yeah, and he brings up Malachowski. Yeah, that's Netanyahu's name.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this week, and they were shocked that, you know, Netanyahu is just a dude from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You know, whose last name was Malachowski, and, you know, now to sound more Middle Eastern, it's Netanyahu, or, you know, Gal Gadot is Gal Greenstein and not Gadot, you know, by birth. It's interesting.
Greenstein is not nearly as sexy as Gal Gadot, right?
No, and definitely sounds like you come from Ukraine or something like that. So
right, definitely. Okay, so I have a few more video clips that I want to share, and then we can kind of talk about those. I'm trying to keep everything organized on my end, which is not always the easiest. But I want to play, about 7 minutes of this video, but I am going to stop about 3 minutes in based on something that he says. So let me get this pulled up here.
But where did the people of Khazaria really go? Did they just disappear all of a sudden? Were they really assimilated by new powers? The question of Khazar legacy extends far beyond mere cultural influence. A wealth of evidence suggests that significant portions of Eastern European Jewry may actually trace their ancestry to the Khazar realm. This connection, while controversial, is supported by multiple lines of evidence that deserve careful consideration. Consider first the demographic puzzle that historians have long grappled with: the sudden appearance of large Jewish populations in Eastern Europe during the 11th and 12th centuries. The Hungarian chronicler Simon of Keza, writing in the 13th century, noted that many Jews arrived in Hungary from a country called Khazaria. The numbers involved are particularly telling, because while Western European Jewish communities grew gradually over centuries, Eastern European Jewish communities seemed to appear rapidly, and in regions that coincidentally either overlapped with former Khazar territories and trade routes or were situated near the Khazar periphery. The evidence extends beyond demographics. The Cairo-Geniza documents reveal differences between Western and Eastern European Jewish commercial practices. Eastern European Jewish merchants operated along the very same trade routes that had been the lifelines of the Khazar Empire, using commercial terms and practices that differed from their Western counterparts. The 12th century traveler Benjamin of Tudela noted distinct customs among Eastern European Jews that he found foreign to both Sephardic and Western European traditions. Centuries later, the question of Khazar ancestry among Eastern European Jews appeared on a larger scale. Taking various arguments into account, it is perhaps best to let those speak who were themselves of Jewish descent, like Abraham Furkovich, a rabbi active in modern-day Ukraine. He proclaimed that the members of his Turkic-speaking sect were descended from Turkic converts to Judaism. Furkovich belonged to the Karaites of Crimea, a small group of Judaic people who spoke and still speak Turkic languages. By the 19th century, they began to distinguish themselves from other Jewish groups, sending envoys to the Russian rulers to plead for exemptions from harsh anti-Jewish legislation. Successfully, they were granted the same rights as their Christian and pagan Tatar neighbors. Later, they were considered non-Jews by the Nazi invaders.
You knew I wanted to stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at that, because I'm going to bring up again, I'm never going to say the Holocaust didn't happen. I'm not a Holocaust denier. There's way too much proof that, the Nazi regime under Hitler killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
Millions.
A lot of people. But my question is, who did they kill? Because, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the last time when we talked about it, I went down a lineup of countries that harbored or that held Jewish populations, and how many people in those populations perished. What did we say last time? 3 million Poles versus the Jews that were in Austria. I think it was negligible to like almost none. So we had come to the conclusion that they were looking for specific people.
They were looking for specific people. And, when you look at the Russians and the Germans in the Nazi Party were granting these Khazarian Jews, what they were calling them Turkic Jews at that time. They called themselves Ashkenazi, which, if anybody... I always find it interesting that it's Nazis and Ashkenazi, but just linguistically, it's like, wow, that sounds the same. But they were calling themselves white, and they were being granted whiteness by Russia and by Germany. But then when they talk about the atrocities and the oppression that they've been through, they talk about what happened in Germany and they talk about what happened in Russia. Yet, so many of them were not affected. And Hitler had specific Jews with money that he never targeted. He remained friends with them, the Rothschilds being one family of that. So my question is always going to be, who was the victim? Did they round up the regular Jewish people? People even who are Ashkenazi, they don't even know this history, whatever. They're just, like my disclaimer says, these are just Jewish people who are trying to lead a decent life. And I'm sure they got rounded up, because there's one thing that the elites always say is poor people. So, they're going to round those people up. I'm not saying that no Ashkenazi Jews were part of this, but they literally were looking for specific people. So I wanted to have that there because, again, when they bring up the atrocities of things that have happened to them, and they bring up these things, and then you find out that they petitioned to be considered white, and they were granted whiteness. So they were exempt from the concentration camps. They were exempt from what was going on in Russia. I forget the word that was going on there.
Pogroms.
Yeah. So that was something I thought was interesting. I'm going to play a little bit more of this one.
This left the Karaites untouched by the horrors of World War II, unlike other Turkic-speaking Jews like the Krimchak that were almost wiped out. The Karaite situation was picked up by Ernest Renan and others in the late 19th century, which initiated controversial debates among European intellectual elites in the early 20th century, on the eve of World War II and the extermination of most European Jews. After the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, discussions picked up again. The most prominent and important post-war advocate of the so-called Khazar hypothesis was Arthur Koestler, an Austro-Hungarian author born into a Jewish family. He proposed that after the conversion of the Khazar Empire, the Khazars time and time again westwards into Eastern Europe, with the largest wave of migrants arriving after the destruction of the state in the 11th century. Another notable author is Shlomo Sand. He published his book, The Invention of the Jewish People, in which he also proclaimed that Ashkenazi Jews in Europe were directly descended from Khazars. While Shlomo Sand is a self-proclaimed anti-Zionist and thus opposed to the idea of a Jewish nation in the form of Israel, Arthur Koestler's book was also panned by critics. In general, the Khazar hypothesis has been criticized for decades. One of the main arguments against this theory is that DNA analysis would disprove a Khazar ancestry of Ashkenazi Jews. This, however, is not entirely true.
Right. And we know that's not true, because what is happening when, and there are videos all over YouTube. I decided not to pull any because there's so many, but you've seen them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people who are not in Israel, because it's illegal to get DNA tests in Israel. But
and why would it be illegal?
Huh.
Right.
Probably because of what's happening with people who are Ashkenazi Jews outside of Israel, taking DNA tests and finding out that they are Eastern European and Turkic. So they're literally proving the Khazar hypothesis.
What's interesting to me is how much they're actually telling you who they are. They've written books about it. They've done papers. And, you know, the resounding rebuttal to all of this is, well, nuh-uh.
Right.
And you're just supposed to believe that. I mean,
right. Right. But there's nothing that ties them to being these Semitic people. Right. In fact, most of the DNA tests you'll see, it's all Eastern European, and they don't even have the Turkic tie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might be interesting for you to share with people, because, you know, they chose to be called Ashkenazi Jews. They chose that name. That wasn't foisted upon them. You know, they were called Turkic Jews. They've been called Caucasian Jews. They've been called Circassian Jews. They've been called Taurian Jews. They chose the name Ashkenazi Jews and call themselves the Ashkenaz. So can you share with people where the name Ashkenaz comes from?
I always get it mixed up with, I mean, how many rungs below Gomer and then ostensibly Japheth that Ashkenaz comes in. But, you know, again, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or however you pronounce it, I never get that name right. Anyway, and this is during the time, and I can't remember, you know, which scriptures it is, but it's talking about this person begat this person begat this person, right? And if you look at a family tree, you can see clearly that Ashkenaz is a grandson of Gomer, who is, you know, I believe a grandson, if not a son, of Japheth. I mean, it's just, it's right there, you know.
Right. And the whole point is they're supposedly Semitic, right? Their whole entire existence is based upon that they descend from Shem. Right.
And the shaming tactic that they levy upon the rest of us is to say that you're anti-Semitic. And these days, I'm like, I can't be anti-Semitic if you're not a Semite.
Right. Right. And that's where Semite comes from. Comes from Shemite, is Semite, right? Or Semitic. And then where we get the term Hebrew from is from Shem's grandson, Eber. So the Hebrews or Hebrews is where we get that term from. So the Semites are all 12 tribes of Israel. The only ones we ever focus on is the supposed Judeans and the Jews, Jus, right? But now we have Jewish, who are people who chose the name Ashkenaz, who is the grandson of Japheth. And when you read the scriptures, Japheth is white. God makes him white. And so they literally chose the name of the grandson of Japheth and not anybody in Shem's line. So, like I always say, they tell you who they are. You have
Right.
to listen. Hi,
Right. And
Leon. Thanks
this
for being
whole idea of a in some of the reading that I've done, this whole idea of it, being promoted as a ancestral holy land and all this stuff, that's fairly recent. And again, we pointed out in the last conversation that the earliest Zionists like Theodor Herzl, who by the way was Austro-Hungarian, so right next door to Ukraine, right? These people were atheists, so I'm sure that they found out pretty quick that it was a good selling point to say, well, it's in the Bible, we're we're tied into it being a holy land for us, don't you believe that, John and Judy
here.
Christian? And here we go.
Right, because when they were bringing up all the other places that they were considering going,
Yeah.
they were like, well, Israel's in the Bible, so we'll take that one, and then we'll make it or Palestine is in the Bible, and we'll call it Israel for the tribes of Israel, and we'll take that.
Yeah, what was it? Madagascar, Uganda,
Yeah.
I think Argentina. They were thinking about a lot of different places.
Right.
And Argentina is pretty interesting for reasons that I'm sure we'll talk about later.
we will definitely talk about, because man, that place, woo.
Yeah, to this day.
To this day.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Piashik, yes, the letter J is new, and I think some people do talk about, like, even about Jesus. His name wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. But yeah, Judea was not called Judea because they did not utilize the letter J. So most of the times it's an H or a Y. So thank you for throwing that in there. Hi, Cosmic Surfer TV. Okay, so speaking of what we were just talking about, this lineage, I want to bring up something called the Schechter letter. So we're going to take that off. Sorry, I'm going to have to, I got so many things to pull up.
I'll do your thing.
Okay. The Schechter letter is what I want to talk about. So one of the things that happened in our more modern times is that this letter called the Schechter letter just shows up. And what it says is that these Judean Jews were seeking asylum in Khazaria. So think about this. This letter is now saying, oh, yeah, we do come from Khazaria, but we were Judeans in Khazaria. And then when nobody bought what this letter was writing, they were like, yeah, we've never been Khazarians. But in this Schechter letter, it talks about it's the supposed correspondence, right? Where Jews from Persia and Armenia migrated to Khazaria to flee persecution. Then they supposedly mingled with the Khazars, assimilating, meaning that they brought their
Traditions.
Hebrew Semitic DNA to the Khazars.
Mm-hmm.
And in this assimilation, now they're Khazarian Jew, right? So in this letter, this leader arises Sabriel, who's married to Sirach, right? And because they have this Jewish blood, they descended from these early Jewish settlers, Sabriel and Sirach. They convinced everybody to convert to Judaism. Now, the problem being that, I love this sentence, it differs radically from every other alleged source on the Khazar conversion to Judaism and in its naming of the ruling class. The names of the figures involved, Sabriel being the name of an angel in the Jewish mystical tradition, and Sarah being a biblical figure and the claim of descendant from the tribe of Simeon, whose demise is chronicled in the Bible, strongly indicate the text is an unreliable source and heavily influenced in a rich Jewish tradition of wish fulfillment and mystical writing about the 10 lost tribes of Israel. So this was an attempt, right, to say, okay, yeah, we were Khazarian, but we were Jewish Khazarians.
Yeah, later.
Right. So, and like I said, as soon as it's debunked, some people still point to the Schechter letter and try to say that it's real, except that everything in there doesn't line up with anything else that we have. And my biggest problem with it is the names, right? There's this leader, Sabriel, who's married to Sirach. Those are not names that people would have in that region in that time. They would have a Khazarian name, right? Because it says in this letter, they are like very remote descendants of these Jewish settlers.
So what you're trying to tell me is that this whole process of renaming yourself is like a 1,300 year tradition. Or I shouldn't say 1,300, but at least 1,000 year tradition, by this group of people. Oh,
well,
no, that's not me. I was that was last week,
Right.
Somebody
Who's
totally
Gal
different now.
Greenstein? I never heard of her.
Yeah, who's that?
Right. I've always been Israeli. Always. So, we do have to throw out the Schechter letter because there are people who will point to it, even though it has been debunked. And the conversations are a little bit crazy making. They are gaslighting because on one hand, they'll say, we don't descend from the Khazarians. We are Semites. We come from Israel. And then when you give them all this information, they'll say, well, the Schechter letter proved. Well, wait, if you're not Khazarian, then what do you care about the Schechter letter that the Khazarians had some other connection to Judeans when they didn't? It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Okay. So there's another thing I want to pull up that I absolutely...
Real quick, while you're pulling that up, isn't
Sure.
it an interesting sidebar that during that period of time, everybody was petitioning to be white?
Yeah.
Here
and
in
having
America,
their wishes granted.
Right. You could just go into a court and just, voila, become white and,
Right.
get all of the benefits of whiteness, so I've heard anyway. That's just that's an interesting footnote, for me.
Some people could.
Yeah.
Some people could. The more melanin there was, the least likely that was going to happen. Except Indian people who are they can be pretty heavily melanated, still got plain whiteness.
Yeah, I was going to say you had Bhagat Singh in this country, who, an Indian man who was able to, he went to the Supreme Court and got his whiteness granted to him.
Mm-hmm.
Just thought it was an interesting footnote.
It is. And then, okay, so you have the Singh who goes to the Supreme Court to get his whiteness granted, right? Mm-hmm. But then you also have the brother of that actress who puts on blackness to be able to go to school, to get scholarships. Right?
Mindy Kaling. Yeah, it was Mindy Kaling's brother. That's what I was thinking.
Her brother pretended to be black to
Mhm.
get scholarships. So, yeah, very melanated. I mean, obviously, these white folks in the in the admissions office can't tell people apart. And he gets these scholarships and takes it away from some other young Black kid who could have had that.
Yeah,
And then
I could be wrong, and I'm gonna take a look at it real quick, but I could be wrong. But I think that I want to say he went to an HBCU, so that's even more terrible. If he was
I
able to
think,
get past,
did he
I
go to Howard?
think so, something like that. But go ahead, I'll find it.
Yeah, find that because we want to make sure we're putting out the right info, because it's bad enough that he is
Right,
pretending to be Black. And so here we have people who can claim whiteness or Blackness or be Indian. And, that also makes me think of Kamala Harris. I'm not going to bring that up again. That debate is over with, but I think that's something to keep in mind, that when you have, and I'm not bagging on Indian people, like they've had it great in their lifetime, especially the lower caste. But, when you have a society that allows people to move back and forth,
right,
into whiteness,
right.
into a minority, into, for whatever benefits them at any moment, you can see how the caste system is set up, because Black Americans, especially ADOS and FBA Black Americans,
Yeah,
don't
you're not going nowhere.
don't and have never had the privilege to move around in this caste system.
Yeah, so St. Louis University is where he went. That is not an HBCU. For some reason, I
Okay.
had HBCU on the brain, but he adopted the name JoJo. So he went full
Right.
bore into, get me a fade and try to look Black, call myself
Right.
JoJo.
He got a
It's,
perm, right? He got a permanent
no,
implant.
he cut his hair real low, and
Oh,
faded it on the sides.
so
Is
you
the
couldn't
pictures that
tell
I've
that
seen
it
of
was
him.
straight.
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
Wow. Yeah. So let's talk about Sochi. Okay.
Okay.
So interesting. Some things about the Caucasus Mountains. And I bring up the Caucasus Mountains a lot. We brought it up last time. We've had discussions about it. We have heard from at least one specific Black elder in the past talking about, people coming out of the Caucasus Mountains. There's Cat Williams talking about the Caucasus Mountains, the mountains of Caucasus, right?
Right.
But I think there's some confusion, because if you look at people who are actually Caucasian, from the Caucasus Mountain region, they're dark. They're Turkic,
Yeah.
and they don't look white. So I wanted to throw some stuff out there and talk about why white people are called Caucasians. Okay. So, and the reason why this is about Sochi is because there was a lot of attention put on that region during the Olympics. Okay.
Mm, okay.
And we really hadn't thought about that region since the American
Mm-mm.
Civil War. Okay. So a lot of people had made mention of the Caucasus Mountains, right? And these writers in the 1800s. And the interesting thing is, they always talked about the beauty of the women from that region, particularly the Circassians, which was an indigenous group in the Caucasus Mountain area, is what they were talking about. Circassian women were supposedly sold into what they called white slavery, into
Mm,
Ottoman harems. Okay, this was a story, right? Adventures in Caucasia, right? The interesting thing about Circassia is that these Circassians were pale, blonde-headed, blue-eyed. which was very odd for that region, which is also why they stuck out, right? Now, the interesting thing is, then fast forward a little bit, we have a president, and I know it's in here, I can't remember which president it is, who became really interested in it. Let me look, I'll find out. Nope, it's farther down. It was in the late 1800s. If you guys want to look at this article, you can. I don't want to waste time. Oh, President Woodrow Wilson. There we go. Okay.
Oh God, that doesn't surprise me.
Right. So, all these stories and these myths and these adventures about these beautiful Nordic looking people, the Circassians around the Caucasus Mountains. Well, this became like the pinnacle of beauty. And so in the 1800s, you would actually see newspaper articles comparing people to Circassian beauties. Okay. So this is the pinnacle of whiteness, right? These Circassians, they're so beautiful. And so then Woodrow Wilson is like, we got to find these people, right? So
yeah, of course he would.
They go to find these beautiful, you got to bring the pretty ladies home. So they go to find these beautiful Circassians, and they can't find them anywhere. Possibly because most of them had gone to Eastern Europe. These were just remnants of, there are reddish, blonde-headed, light-eyed mummies in that area from Ukraine, which, remember, Ukraine, Kiev, all of that was part of that Khazarian empire.
Yeah, the Khazars literally founded Kiev.
Right.
Literally.
Right. And this was also the homeland of the Goths, and it was also the original hotbed of the Neanderthalic hominids. So it's that whole area is the Neanderthal hotbed, where the Goths were, where the Khazars were, where the Ashkenaz are. It's all Ukraine, Kiev, Turkic area.
I keep on talking about how Woodrow Wilson would be, super fascinated, with this whole idea of, Caucasians, et cetera, or Circassians in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the president who played Birth of a Nation in the Oval Office, right?
Yeah.
Which led to one of the biggest spikes in Klan membership, maybe, that we've seen in this country. So, shout out to Woodrow.
And so, interestingly, here we go with, they're trying to find these Circassians. They can't really find them. They're hearing stories about them, but they belong somehow in this region of the Caucasus Mountains. And, so the white folks of the time were like, well, white folks come in brown-haired and blonde-haired, and they might have brown eyes and blue eyes. And so, they're Caucasian, because the Circassian pinnacle of beauty comes from the Caucasus Mountains. And so that's where we get the term Caucasian to be white, but only in the United States, is because they viewed the Circassians, which they later determined themselves without any DNA. They said the Circassians were Neanderthals. They said it.
Yeah, think about all of this. Because this is what Woodrow Wilson is, 1915, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
This is smack dab in the middle of the eugenics era. And just think about all this lead up to what we ended up getting in the 30s with Hitler and his ideals, and then you come to find out later that he got all that from America.
Well, and that was what I was getting ready to talk about. So great lead in. No, that was a great lead in. So this Neanderthal, Aryan, Caucasian, white supremacy lead was inspiring to Hitler. So he got a lot of his ideas on how to deal with the Jewish population from how America was treating the Black population. And so Hitler, if you guys can watch the video I did on Hitler and Neanderthal Aryan supremacy, but he was a member of the Thule Society, which believed all of these things. So they believe, the Thule Society believes in something called Hyperborea, and they believe that's the ancient Arctic Aryan homeland. Okay. He believes that the Aryans came from the cold, which they did. He didn't know that, but the Thule Society believes that Nordic skulls are superior. So that supraorbital ridge, sloped forehead, Marjorie Taylor Greene looking face. They believe in the root races theory. So if anybody wants to learn about the root races, that comes from Helena Blavatsky. And not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday on the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, I'm going to be telling you all about the root races theory because unfortunately the Book of Knowledge gets into that. So, which is essentially what they believe is that white people are the pinnacle of, the Aryans are the pinnacle of evolution, and what was that? Arabic and African people are remnants of previous evolution. Like they didn't go ahead and evolve; they're just leftovers. So that's the root races theory. The Thule Society believes that Neanderthals were the first Aryans, which they were. They were actually proven right. And that the Aryans are the master race, which is wrong. Yeah. So members of the Thule Society, not just Hitler, Rudolf Hess, who was the deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, Alfred Rosenberg, authored The Myth of the 20th Century, filled with racial mysticism and pseudo-history. Rosenberg is a Jewish name, by the way, folks. Dietrich Eckart, author of Mein Kampf. Karl Herrer, co-founder of the German Workers' Party, which became the Nazi Party. And these are the same people that we then smuggled. I use the term we loosely. We then smuggled out of Nazi Germany with, and I get them conflated, Operation Paperclip and rat lines. And so Adrian's going to help explain that a little bit better because he's much better at that kind of thing.
Well, Paperclip was for the scientists, and that was the United States military government trying to actually trying to compete with Russia for who's going to get the lion's share of these scientists. And these are the people who would later, go on to help us with advancements in what would later become NASA, chemical warfare, nuclear warfare, guided missile systems, all of these things. I mean, the V2 rocket from Wernher von Braun ended up kind of being the template for what we later called the Saturn V, and we got to the moon with. Literally went from being a Nazi war criminal 1 minute to being, an American sweetheart the next. Anecdotally, I remember when I was still in the car business at the time, I had a really good customer who loved Volkswagens. He was a German guy. So, he resonated with me. But he told me the story about in World War II, he fought on the side of the Germans at age 19. By the time Korea comes around, he's flying aircraft for the United States. So we're literally taking these folks, dressing them up, changing names, changing identities, and putting them on our side. Now, rat lines was where you had like the Red Cross, you had the Catholic Church. There was one other entity I can't think of right now who were providing safe passage for some of the worst and most sought after um, of the Nazi regime, such as folks like Mengele, Joseph Mengele, giving them safe haven again in Argentina, right? So that was the difference. Paperclip was the United States getting acquittals and uh, things like that for, I think, what was it, up to 1,600 Nazi scientists to come and work
Yeah.
for us instead.
So 1945 to 1959, over 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just another side note, before we got into this part of the conversation, it's funny to me because we're talking about Aryans being the top of the heap, the master race, the ideal, the pinnacle. But if I'm not mistaken, Bhagat Singh got his whiteness by claiming that he too was Aryan,
right?
An Indian man. So they're
He
kind of
did.
all over the place with
Right.
what they consider Aryan.
Maybe he's Aryan on his mother's side.
He's Aryan on the inside,
Apparently. I'm going to say hi to some people who came in. Hi, JB Designs. He says, what's up, Adrian? He was in the clouds. Wanted to say hello. Leon is here. So glad that you're here. Uh-oh, Spain Man did a book report on Woodrow Wilson in 4th grade.
You didn't know, Spain Man. You didn't know. It's all right.
Yeah. The nameless protagonist is in here talking about Blavatsky. Yeah, she was the founder of Theosophy, which it's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. So we'll talk about Helena Blavatsky in not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. And os to you as well, nameless. Donald Piashik says, I don't believe anyone went to the moon. Well, all I know is I wasn't there. So I don't know whether they did or not. Okay. So a lot of the people that, we brought into the United States, that we spent a lot of money and time and energy to get them. Yes, 1,600 people. And like you said, getting acquittals, right? These are people who are in the world court. They're at The Hague. They're at Nuremberg. They are on.
These people are about to be hanged.
Right. Big time trials. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have spent a lot of time, energy, and money to get these specific people here. So we're not just going to, here, go do your thing. We got to set them up. Right. We got to set them up nice because we want their technology and we want their knowledge. And we don't care about the Aryan supremacy ideology. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of these scientists, engineers, and technicians, most had links to the Anunnaki research. So this was from the Nazi Institute, the research, the human research that they were doing, which was all tied to Thule-based racial and esoteric anthropology. Yes, esoteric anthropology is what they called it. Yeah. And so they were doing human research. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, when they come in, for some of these scientists and rocket scientists, right? NASA is created specifically as an agency for their knowledge. That's where NASA came from. Nazi to NASA. Okay. They were also absorbed given jobs in the CIA. They were given jobs in the entirety of the military industrial complex. Mm-hmm. And they were given jobs in Cold War racial research.
So put a pin in the part talking about CIA. They're literally the foundation of MK Ultra and using illicit drugs, psychoactive drugs, and you can explain that stuff a lot better than I can. But they were, I mean, this is literally finding out that that Shield is Hydra. I mean,
Yeah.
literally,
Right.
literally,
So it was, and you're exactly right. So once they're absorbed into the CIA and the military industrial complex, then we see this huge rise in experimenting on citizens, especially without consent. Right. And there's one you and I have recently been talking about this. Well, they call it treatment without consent. I call it experimentation without consent, but it's putting fluoride in water.
Mm-hmm.
That was done without consent. And it was kind of an experiment to see, like, well, let's see what happens, because our theory is it's going to help people's teeth. And it absolutely does not help your teeth.
It's all about complacency.
Right. It actually causes brain fog. It's a neurotoxin, by the way, folks. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. It is toxic for your brain. And it causes complacency, brain fog, it's hard to think critically and problem solve and all that. Spain Man agreed with you, Adrian. He says, I'm literally sitting here comparing this to Hydra.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that in the movies, Marvel gave a nod to actually what happened in America. What was it? It was Captain America, Winter Soldier. Yeah, I think that that the movies was giving a nod to actually what happened. We brought all these people over, right? We made a deal. They got to continue their work and their research. We got to get some cool tech. You can always buy America off with some cool tech, as William Cooper, right? was saying.
He's on the same page with Iron Clay in the chat.
We'll do a deal with aliens. If we can get some tech. The people over there, just pick them up, go to the zip code, lift them up in their sleep, and put a probe in there, and we're good with it. Just give us some tech,
right? Right. And and if you haven't seen the show on Bill Cooper, you should watch it. But Bill Cooper, who had access to secret military documents and had top security clearance, is the one who said and did not waver and continued to say that the United States government signed a deal with extraterrestrials, so entities that live outside of Earth, to trade tech for humans to experiment on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're expendable.
So Iron Clay says, sounds like they were aliens doing experiments on humans. And I can't necessarily say aliens, but it's like I say to people, the world is filled with people. There's only so many humans. That's my
take from that what you will.
Yeah.
Another little footnote. Right now we have Elon talking about being a multi-planetary species.
Yeah.
That's his goal, right? With SpaceX and things like that. And so then the question is, well, where do you get that from? You do a little bit of research on Elon, you find out that his grandfather, who was an American, right? Because they started out here in America before they went to South Africa and set up shop. Was a big fan of who? Wernher von Braun, right? And Wernher von Braun had authored a piece of fiction, also talking about being a multiplanetary species, and that in this work of fiction, he had gone to Mars and encountered an indigenous group of people who were called the Elon, Elon. So, kind of as an ode to this guy, his family names him Elon. And he's on a big mission to try to, make good on the stuff that that von Braun was talking about.
Right. And and it's couched in so many things. It's kind of like, Trump's new bill is, couched in, we want to serve homeless populations, but I work with the homeless populations and I read it, and but that's not what this show is about. We can do that one another time. I want to, Auntie says fluoride calcifies your pineal gland. And yes, that is scientifically proven that it does calcify your pineal gland. Donald Piashik says, behold a pale horse. Oh, I don't have the book in here. Yes, that is the book written by Bill Cooper. JB Design says, do you think the advent of a multipolar world economy due to the digitization of financial systems would impact the plans of those who seek to create a new world order? Now, I will
Yes.
answer for me, Dre, Adrian, you can answer for you. I think technocracy plays into New World Order. I think it is the same thing. And so now this is my opinion, and this is just looking historically and looking at the technocrats and what the technocrats seek to do. Just hit my microphone. I'm sorry if that was loud. But I view it as a stage in the step towards the New World Order. It's one of the prongs, just like the United States becoming the military prong of the New World Order is part of that movement. And then Israel becoming the capital of the global government. That's what we're moving towards too. And these plans have been in place. And so I don't distinguish the two. I like technology, but technocracy and global things, I think, causes more harm than good. That's just my answer.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that even Elon's grandfather was talking about a technocracy way back when, and all of this stuff. Again, Werner von Braun.
Yeah.
This stuff has been in the works for quite a long time. But as far as and Maggie, you'll have to tell me if because I can't remember who responded in the chat asking the question, but I think that a multipolar society is a check to those aims for the future, and that's why America is fighting so hard to continue things being unipolar. They
I
they
get
don't
it.
want they don't want a BRICS conglomerate. I don't think that they can stop it, quite honestly, but they don't want a BRICS conglomerate coming along where you have a Russia, China, and Iran, Indonesia, you know, um, putting their hands into things, let alone, I mean, heaven forbid Africa, ever figures out its situation and, really comes online as a major player in the world. But,
Right.
the
As
more
a
that they can keep,
republic.
yeah, the more that they can keep all these other, areas repressed, the further that they can push, push on uh, with their unipolar aims.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. Yeah, I wasn't looking as much as on that multipolar. So I see what you're saying. Leon says, Maggie, this is why I care less for communism versus liberal capitalism, because the group that created these concepts are in Russia and America and Britain and the small state. Yeah, I mean, it's all elitism, right? Donald Piashik thinks that Elon Musk nor Peter Thiel look like humans. I agree. Again, there are a lot of people on this planet, not a lot of humans. Ketnapa Jones says Sam Vaknin argues that individuals with severe psychological pathology have defects that render them not fully human or incomplete humans. I don't agree with that. I think human is DNA and not, I mean, it's like being called a Homo sapien. Homo sapiens are humans. And Palantir Technologies, that's Peter Thiel, yeah. Okay, so here's what I wanted to circle back to. When I said that so many people, Jews, were, trying to be white, they were trying to be excused from these particular things. We've talked a little bit last time on how the Jews of biblical times that would have been enslaved by Pharaoh were Black. So my question always is now, not always is, but is now, who? So when people of Jewish descent talk about we've always been the victim, we've always been oppressed, we were enslaved by Pharaoh. No, you weren't. Those were Black people. You know, right. And then you get to opt out of oppression, and nobody else gets to opt out of oppression and be, you know, well, except white women, we always get to, you know, opt out of oppression. But you know, that's another classification of people who can be an oppressed minority and also an oppressor at the same time.
Right.
But again, that's another show. So if the Jews that we know of now are Khazars from Circassia, right? That's where they were from, okay? And the Nazis believe that those folks are Aryans, right? And the US believes that white folks descend from these perfect Circassians. Then why did the Nazis kill them? It's a hard question.
Yeah.
But my question is, who did they kill? And that was when we started looking up who did they actually kill. And we saw that they were targeting specific Jews. They were not targeting a lot of the Ashkenazi Jews. Were Ashkenazi Jews swept up? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the Polish Jews were
the Poles got it the worst. Yeah, 3 million people.
Right. Not the German Jews who were there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. At that time, like we were just learning about, they had mandatory Palestine, and the Germans were helping them leave. They were saying, if you give us your money, we'll take a little bit of your money and we'll move you to mandatory Palestine, Israel, and give you some of your money back.
Well, don't forget also that, you know, during rat lines, you know, I talk about Argentina, but, you know, a lot of Germans ended up in the Middle East as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were Nazis in Israel.
You know, and again, I keep on coming back to what was the first things that the newly displaced Jewish populations, what was one of the first things that they did when they got there to Palestine? You know, they started to abuse the ethnic Jews that were already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know,
and we hear tons of stories
does that
about
make you anti-Semitic at that point? I mean, I'm trying to figure this out.
Right.
You know?
The Jews that had already been there, had been there for a long time, who were Semitic,
mm-hmm.
looked
Semitic.
Semitic.
That would have been the Sephardic Jews, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They started kicking them out and things like that because they didn't want them to be there. So my question is, you know, who were the victims, right? Who did the Nazis kill? The Ashkenazi or the Hebrews? Which is a big question, right? So you guys can watch the Hitler show. But this is where it always leaves me, okay? The Israel inheritance, because they talk about the inheritance a lot. Israel is our inheritance, okay? So as far as the Israel inheritance, did they suffer, right? Because they're getting the inheritance because of their suffering. Well, Black Hebrews were the slaves during Moses' time.
Mm-hmm.
Which Jews suffered the Holocaust? There were very specific Jews that were targeted. Ashkenazi Jews who had money were able to work with the German Nazi regime to go to Israel or get white.
During your Hitler show, you had talked more about it being a struggle against, you know, a struggle with those who were elite versus those who were not.
Right.
You know, and
well, the people
you know,
with money.
This is the 30s, then we're still steeped into eugenics, you know, and obviously Hitler's fever dream about, you know, who is the master race and what do they look like, and you know, if your nose slopes over too much this way, then you're not, you know, you're not one of us. You got to go to the gas chambers, you know. So I think that had a lot to do with it, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because like I said, one thing elites hate, um, one of many things elites hate is poor people.
Hmm.
So if you had money, they liked you, you know. Spade Man's bringing up the Havara Agreement. Donald Piashik says history and truth are not anti-Semitic, in my opinion. I agree.
Yeah, we agree.
Um, Leon, I don't know about the Kernersberg in Prussia. I don't know about them. So, that'll give me something more to look at. Leon sends me lots of stuff, lots of research, which I love. So Black Hebrews were the slaves, under Pharaoh. Specific Jews suffered under the Holocaust, the poor ones. And so if these Ashkenazi Jews are not Semitic, they're not in Eber's line, because Eber, where we get the name Hebrew, is in Shem's line. So not only are they not in Israel's line, they're not in Shem's line, they're in Japheth's line. They're not Hebrew at all, and they didn't suffer any of those atrocities. Then is the inheritance of Israel actually theirs?
Well, who was it? The leader of Egypt, Abdul Nasser. You know, he said,
That's going to be a video I play at the end.
"Oh, okay, oh my bad. Should I just leave it for the end then?"
Yeah, because it quotes him.
Okay, sorry.
But you're right. I mean, and that was what I was leading up to. So, we're on the same page there. So that was all I had for part 2. I do want to say that Adrian and I are planning a part 3, which is going to tell you where the actual homeland of Ashkenazi Jews is, because there is one. And it is playing a big part in geopolitics today.
It's a really big place too.
Yeah, they can all fit.
Right.
Right. So we're going to talk about the actual Ashkenazi Jewish homeland in the part 3 when we get to doing that, probably in a couple weeks. And then after that, we're going to do a part 4 where we dig into the quote that was made by a Israeli leader saying that Black American youth are the biggest threat to Israel. And we're going to dig into why. And we can also call that AKA the missing Hebrews. So those are going to be the parts that we're going to do on Wednesdays. I'm going to continue to do the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. We are getting deep and getting into a lot of these same topics. Again, because the Book of Knowledge is like if Christian dispensationalism and Jewish mysticism had a very ugly baby. That's the Book of Knowledge. And so it's giving us a lot of information about their playbook. Thank you, Diedrich. Diedrich says that he's new to the channel and eager to learn. I love it. Donald Piashik, no spoiler alerts. Knock it off. But he's already there. We kind of told on ourselves there a little bit. But
a little bit.
So next Saturday is going to be about Pythagoras, harmonics, and the Great Pyramids, because we're going to talk about the actual science about the Great Pyramids, not what the Egyptologists say that it is, because the science is fascinating and so interesting. So we're going to be doing that next week. So before I play the final video, Adrian, do you have a closing statement?
This is a lot of fun. I'm enjoying myself. I like bringing everyone into these wild conversations that we generally have anyway, without without YouTube. So just kind of bringing people into these little rabbit holes that we generally go down. So this has been fun for me. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Awesome. Leon, will you send me that in Patreon? he has the whole video of that woman saying that Black youth are dangerous. It was edited. So it's possible that it was edited to look the way it looked. However, we can play it exactly how she said it, that Black youth are dangerous, and it still will fit in exactly what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you sent the link. Leon, will you send it in Patreon so I can pull it off of there? I appreciate you so much. All right, I'm going to play the ending video, and then I'm going to show you guys a picture of my dog. Well, I'm actually not, because the video went bye-bye. So I am going to try to find it here real quick. I didn't want to let people sit and wait. I had it pulled up and I must have pulled it off of there. Sorry about that, guys, because I do want you to see that Nasser video. It's just going to take me a second. I apologize. And I was so excited to show you a picture of my dog.
In 1965, the former president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, said he couldn't respect the present Jews in Israel because they left Israel black and they came back white. Because they were Caucasians when they returned, a Turkic Mongol Asians from the Caucasus Mountains, the Russian steppes. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. I am black. The Hebrew word there is shachar ha-anya. It literally translates to, I am dark-skinned. Strong's number, and I don't use Strong's numbers very often, but there's gonna be pushback. Strong's number 7838, shachar, from Strong's number 7835, dusky. So the word shachar means dusky. And if you look in the concise Oxford English Dictionary in the 10th edition, dusky means darkish in color, euphemistic of a person black and dark-skinned. Black and dark-skinned. Black and dark-skinned.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not soteric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.